And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana University basketball news and discussion. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Podcast on the Brink is a joint production of the Assembly Hall and Inside the Hall. For complete coverage of IU basketball, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com.
Tickets for IU basketball are available online at iuhoosiers.com or by calling 866-IU-SPORTS. The three remaining winter break games are December the 18th against Fort Wayne, December 21st against Tennessee Tech, and December 28th against Youngstown State. IU basketball tickets make for great holiday gifts. Be sure to visit us online at iuhoosiers.com or get your tickets by calling 866-IU-SPORTS. Go IU!
On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, we have a special guest as A.J. Moye joins us to reflect on his career at Indiana, obviously to discuss the Duke game and his famous block on Carlos Boozer. And at the end of the interview, I asked him what his pep talk would be to Indiana heading into this Duke game, and you are not going to want to miss his response because it is fantastic. Before that, Alex Bozich joins me, and we look back at the past three games for Indiana, what went right, what went wrong, and what it means for Indiana moving forward, not just for the Duke game, but also for the rest of the season and the tough stretch coming up. All of that this week on Podcast on the Brink. Like most sports fans, you've probably found that buying tickets to sports and concerts too can be a complicated process. But here's the thing, there is a better, simpler way to buy, and that is with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to live events because with SeatGeek's seamless mobile experience, you can actually buy or even sell tickets in just 2 taps. SeatGeek helps you find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed. And there is nothing quite like seeing your favorite team or musician in person, and SeatGeek will help you get closer to the action for a great value. In fact, SeatGeek helped me get closer to the action last season when I saw Yogi play here in Dallas. I'll probably go see him again this year. And same thing for my wife this offseason. I got her concert tickets as a gift, and she really enjoyed it. And we did it all with SeatGeek because SeatGeek is designed to make the ticket buying experience easier than ever. They save you time and money by searching multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find you amazing deals. Now, here is what you should do next, because best of all, Podcast on the Brink listeners actually get $20 off of your first SeatGeek purchase. So there's that little bonus. All you have to do is download the SeatGeek app and enter the promo code BRINK today. That's promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K, for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All right, and let's begin this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink, talking about Indiana's 3-game homestand so far, Alex, and then and looking ahead to Duke. I would say, as you look at kind of maybe some macro takeaways from these last 3 games for Indiana, I certainly feel a lot better heading into the Duke game than I did before these 3 games. It doesn't mean that I'm, overly confident about our chances to win or anything. But I think we did see some things from Indiana in these games, albeit against, not the greatest of competition. But I thought we saw some things that we needed to see to suggest that this team is making progress. Chief among them, Indiana's veterans, guys like Robert Johnson, Juwan Morgan, and Josh Newkirk, really seem to get themselves going, which I think is obviously huge, not just for the Duke game, but for the entire season moving forward. That was my biggest takeaway. What did you take from these 3 games?
Well, I think they got better over the 3-game stretch. I thought the Eastern Michigan game of the 3 was their best. So I thought it was encouraging that they played maybe their best game of the season against, in that stretch of opponents, the best opponent of those 3. So, the turnovers is what, I keep coming back to. That seems to be headed in the right direction. You mentioned the 3 upperclassmen who played well. Josh Newkirk obviously played very well in that 3rd game. I still think he needs to become more consistent in terms of his decision-making and taking care of the ball, but it was really good to see him shoot the ball from the perimeter as well as he did. And the other guy who just really continues to impress me who admittedly I didn't think was going to be anywhere close to the player that he's shown that he is so far, is Al Durham. He's not starting, obviously, but playing roughly 28 to 30 minutes a game, not turning the ball over, making great decisions, and continues to show that he can get to the foul line, draw fouls. He hasn't been the best three-point shooter to this point. I don't think that's really a strength of his game right now, but he's just doing so many other things on the court that it's been hard, I think, for Archie Miller to keep him off the floor. I mean, he comes in typically 4 or 5 minutes into the game, and then he's playing pretty much the rest of the way with a short break there. So it'd be interesting to see, I think, on Wednesday just how he performs against the higher level of competition. But to me, he's really exceeded expectations at this point.
You know, and if there's a disappointment from these last 3 games, and certainly from the last game, I think it would be Devontae Green, who has been such an important player for this team in spurts. You know, you think back to what Indiana did against Seton Hall and the best stretch that they had in that game. Devontae Green was a big part of it, but his decision-making has been so inconsistent, and his defensive attention to detail, I would say, has been so inconsistent that it seems like Archie Miller is maybe not running out of patience, but certainly in the Eastern Michigan game, he didn't have a lot of patience for it, and Devontae only played 12 minutes, and Archie even made mention in his post-game press conference that, if guys aren't going to do these things, then, the difference now is they didn't get as much playing time. What were your thoughts on Devontae's play overall? And, do you think that what we saw in the Eastern Michigan game is a trend, that now as this system starts to be put in place and, Archie can maybe start to have a little bit of a tougher criteria for who gets minutes because the expectations can go up? Is that something that we're going to see, that if a guy like Devontae keeps making poor decisions with the ball and isn't going to, be able to contain dribble penetration, Archie's going to play other guys who are playing his way?
Yeah, last game was actually a little weird just as an observer on the rotation, in that it felt like the game before that was it South Florida, Arkansas State was the game before that. It kind of felt like down the stretch Indiana stayed with the same 6 or 7 guys, whereas against Eastern Michigan, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Against Eastern Michigan, they played a bigger rotation. You mentioned Devontae Green not getting as many minutes, but I think down the stretch Indiana tried a lot of different combinations, which was interesting to me because I thought we were going to get to a point here later in the non-conference schedule, maybe with these 2 Big Ten games coming up, where maybe the rotation got a little bit smaller. But speaking specifically on Devontae Green, in a lot of ways he kind of reminds me of just some of the things I see on Twitter and some of the reactions, questions I get about him. It kind of reminds me of Troy Williams and the way he played at times in Bloomington, where there was, we like to say good Troy, bad Troy. There's a lot of similarities to Devontae Green because offensively, I feel like as a backcourt guy, he can be the most explosive guy that Indiana has on the floor at times in terms of just his ability to, go get 6 or 8 quick points. On the flip side of that, he can also be the most, tough guy to keep out there because just of some of the silly passes and some of the decisions that he makes that aren't the smartest. And a game coming up like the one on Wednesday, and even this next 5-game stretch, there's a lot of teams that are going to be playing here where if you throw a pass like some of the ones that Devontae's thrown, maybe against Eastern Michigan it's just a turnover, but against a Duke, Gary Trent or Trayvon Duvall or Grayson Allen's probably taking that ball and dunking it on the other end. So it's a difficult thing probably for the coaching staff to figure out how to manage the situation. You don't want to take a guy's confidence, the way he likes to play, completely away, but you also have to have guys being held accountable for the decisions that they make on the court. And I think what we saw in the Eastern Michigan game was Devontae made some poor decisions, and he paid for it with some of his minutes being taken away. So it's definitely a storyline to watch going forward, especially when you have a guy like Al Durham behind him that's been so dependable, so reliable in terms of making good decisions. It gives you, something to kind of say, Devontae, if you don't start doing X, Y, and Z that we're asking you to do, you're not going to play as much. And so it'll be interesting to see how he responds. I think there's a certain element to just the player that he is. We heard Archie talk about it in the preseason. He's that New York City, New York guard. I think some of that is just inherently who Devontae Green is, but there's also a balance for him to strike between, it's okay to play that way at times, but you also can't just give possessions away. And I think that's the thing that they're trying to get across to him the most, because I think defensively he's actually a positive on the court for the most part. It's just the decision making, especially when you're going to play at a slower tempo that IU has shown so far. You can't be giving away possessions, and for a guy who is kind of streaky offensively, it's going to be tough to play him major minutes if he's turning the ball over and not hitting shots consistently.
Any other big takeaways for you from these 3 games before we look ahead to Wednesday's Mammoth matchup?
No, I thought another guy that really impressed me, I thought these past couple games, Freddie McSwain played really well. I had some questions as to whether or not he was going to be able to be on the floor in some of these upcoming games, just against better, bigger competition, where he's not going to be able to just use his athleticism and his strength to overpower people. That's still a question for me, but I think the last 2 games he played really well. The Eastern Michigan game, obviously, I think he got double-digit rebounds. He's, for the most part, not trying to do things that he's not suited to do on the court. And overall, I think he's been a positive. He's an interesting guy, because when you look at him out there, you're like, this guy should be playing football. Just based on how he's built, and he's a little bit lacking in terms of just his overall basketball skills. You don't look at him and watch him play and say that guy's a natural on the court. But I think he's gotten better since last year. I think he's more comfortable in his role, and I think overall, he's been a positive for this team. And I want to see kind of how he contributes moving forward, because I think it's going to be real interesting against Duke, with just the kind of, they have 3 really legitimate post players, and Deron Davis is going to be a prime target for foul trouble. So how Indiana handles its front court rotation is going to be really interesting, I think, against Duke.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about Duke. Obviously, they are an outstanding team. They're going to come into Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall 8-0, and they haven't just fattened up on weak competition. Obviously, they've beaten Michigan State, they've beaten Texas, they've beaten Florida, all teams ranked inside of the KenPom top 30, and Michigan State and Florida are both top 10 teams. And even their other games, they played against some middle kind of 100 competition and dominated them. So they obviously come in already battle-tested, and this is a team that is led, obviously, by a senior in Grayson Allen, who is whatever you may think of him, he is a very good player. And then, obviously, they just have an incredible freshman class led by Marvin Bagley, who I think had, 30 points and 10 rebounds against Florida last night. So he just continues to be terrific. And look, I'm on record ever since this game was scheduled saying that Indiana was going to find a way to win it. And while I'm not officially backing off of that prediction, certainly I had hoped that Indiana would be a little bit further along overall. Even though I'm encouraged by the last 3 games, I think we all maybe hoped that the team on whole would look a little bit better than they've looked so far this year. If you look at the KenPom prediction, it's an 84-75 win for Duke with a 79% chance for Duke to win. And I'd say, actually, that's about how I feel about this game. I think if you played it 5 times, Indiana would probably win one of them. And I'm hoping, obviously, that that's the one Wednesday night. And, if you squint, you can make a bit of a case for Indiana to have some advantages here. Obviously, the talent advantage goes to Duke. The size advantage goes to Duke. But, they're coming off of playing in this PK80 tournament where they're over on the West Coast and they've got to fly back home and then fly back to Indiana. So maybe there's a little bit of a fatigue factor, even though there's a couple days in there. But I always like Indiana's chances with a veteran team at home against a young team, because obviously nothing's going to faze Grayson Allen, but as talented as Marvin Bagley and Trevon Duvall and Wendell Carter and Gary Trent are, those guys are freshmen that are going to be playing in their first really, really tough road environment. And I think it's going to be so important for Indiana as a team that hasn't really started out great this year to get off to a good start in that game, keep the fans engaged, get Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall, just rattling. And maybe you can, all of a sudden you're 10, 15 minutes into the game and you've got, a lead and these Duke players kind of look up and are like, what's going on? And when Indiana has kind of scored upsets in Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall, that's kind of what has happened. And I think that needs to be the formula for a victory, obviously, Wednesday night. Again, it's probably not likely given the talent disparity, but I at least feel better after these last 3 games of thinking we come into it with a puncher's chance if a lot of things fall our way. And I had definitely not been feeling like that about a week ago. So as you look ahead to this game, Alex, how are you feeling about it, and what do you think are the keys to victory for Indiana?
Well, on the positive side, as I look at Duke's Ken Palm profile, Indiana, out of its next 9 opponents, has the best chance to beat the Blue Devils. So there's one thing going for Indiana. On the other side, I would say, the main problems that I see, just, obviously the talent is, the talent discrepancy is obvious just looking at what Duke has. I mean, they've got, obviously, Marvin Bagley is going to be a top 2, top 3 pick in the NBA draft. Wendell Carter is probably going to be, a guy that goes on to play in the NBA. Trevon Duvall. I mean, just the list goes on. I think this game, the size advantage that Duke is going to have is significant. Their ability to go get the ball on the offensive glass. If Indiana does not defensive rebound in this game, it's going to be an uphill battle the whole game. I mean, Duke is
number 1 in the country
right now in offensive rebounding, and they're relentless. And it's a lot of it is the way they want to play, and a lot of it is just they have superior talent in terms of athleticism and ability. These guys can just go get the ball. I mean, Bagley's 6'11", Wendell Carter's 6'10". Grayson Allen is obviously, a really talented player. He's not going to be doing very much, if any, work on the glass. But Bagley and Carter, both right now, I think are in the top 100, top 110 nationally in offensive rebounding percentage. And then even if those guys get in foul trouble, I mean, it's not like they've got scrubs on the bench. I mean, they've got Marquise Bolden, who hasn't played a whole lot this season, but he was, a top 10 player coming in. He's a sophomore. He's a little bit more experienced. So even if, their upper class or their freshmen get rattled, it's not like they don't have guys to go to on the bench who have been through it. It is a very young team. It'll be interesting to see how they respond in their first road game of the season. I'm guessing that Coach K is probably happy that this is happening to Duke. I mean, it's a game that they should win, but it's not going to be a game where they have no adversity, because I can just tell you, just being at games in Bloomington over the past 7 or 8 years, when a top ranked blue blood type comes in, I mean, the atmosphere is electric, and we haven't seen great crowds so far this year in Bloomington, but I think Wednesday is going to change that, and Indiana fans are going to be excited for this game. Whether that has any effect on the game, who knows? Duke could come out and get off to a great start, get a double digit lead and roll, but if there's some adversity, that's kind of when, as you mentioned, if Indiana's in this game 10 or 15 minutes in, the crowd's still in it, that's when freshmen start to look around like, what's happening here? Like there's definitely an element to the building that comes into play where if Indiana starts making shots and the atmosphere just continues to get even more electric, it can have an effect on the opposing team. So I'm sure Coach K is going to be excited just to see how these guys respond to that for the first time. And I'm just excited to see how Indiana, this is probably the best team they're going to play the whole season. If they can, it's not a game I expect Indiana to win, but if they can play a tight, competitive game against Duke at this point in the season, I think it bodes well for what they're going to be able to do once they get into Big Ten play, particularly at home, because I think if this team's going to have, a winning Big Ten record or have a chance to build a resume in conference play that gets them into the conversation for the NCAA tournament, they're going to have to protect home court. And so what better way to kind of get a good measurement of where you stand than playing the number one team at home this early in the season.
Yeah, and look, obviously it would not be unprecedented for Indiana to play a competitive game against a highly ranked Duke team at home, and it wouldn't be unprecedented for Indiana, even if they get down early, to make a comeback on a great Duke team, because we have seen both of those things. And obviously one of the guys who was a key part of a big victory over Duke in 2002 was A.J. Moye. And Alex, obviously you weren't able to join me over the weekend, but I had the chance to interview A.J. and talk with him about a number of subjects. And one of the questions I asked him at the end of the interview was, obviously he had his famous quote, they're just Duke. They're not Jesus Christ and the 12 disciples, before Indiana beat him in 2002. And I asked him, if you could talk to this year's team, coming into this game against a highly ranked Duke team that's favored to win, what would you tell them? And all I have to say is I kind of want to take that clip and send it to Archie. Not that I don't trust whatever pregame message Archie's going to have, but what AJ says is awesome. So I know you haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but it's awesome. And it comes, obviously we're going to play the interview with AJ Moye here in just a second, but it comes at the end of that. And, they may need a little bit of that kind of magic, to get the win. They probably will need, a little bit of that kind of magic to get the win. Guys like AJ Moye rising up and making big plays at opportune times. But either way, it is going to be a fun game, a fun atmosphere, and hopefully it's a good competitive 40-minute matchup.
Absolutely. Hopefully it's a better game than when Indiana went to Duke a couple years ago.
Let's not even mention it.
I can mention that because I spent 8 hours in the car each way to go to that, so I have a lifetime pass to bring it up. So
yeah,
hopefully it'll be better than that game.
Yeah, you do. So one of the reasons why this interview with AJ Moye came about is because our friends at Hoosier Proud are actually releasing 2 kind of commemorative T-shirts about. One is actually from the 2002 Duke game. There's a really cool design that they have, which features A.J. Moye blocking Carlos Boozer, the play that obviously is that we have all seen many, many times and can't forget. And it's also got A.J.'s quote on it. And then there's also another T-shirt with AJ, kind of getting in his real enthusiastic stance, running back on defense, that has AJ Moye on it. The chant, of course, that would ring throughout Assembly Hall when AJ was, playing defense or making one of his big plays. And so these T-shirts, the designs are really, really cool. I ordered one. I haven't gotten it yet. But you can just see from the designs that they're great designs. And so we will have the links to those in the show notes for this episode. I'll tweet them out also. They'll be on the HoosierProud.com website. I don't know exactly where they'll be on the website, but probably if you look under the Indiana University section, I would assume that they will be in there. But really, really cool T-shirts, and I think it's really cool that AJ did that with Hoosier Proud. We obviously really appreciate him taking the time to talk with us. So go check out these shirts if you like them. Order them. And look, hopefully we have a little bit of A.J. Moye karma heading into this game on Wednesday night, because he was part of one of the biggest wins ever over Duke, and it's time. I say it's time to get another one. The time has come, so we'll see if the Hoosiers can do it. But any final thoughts, Alex, before we roll into this interview with A.J.?
No, I'm just excited for this stretch. I mean, not only is Duke coming up on Wednesday, we'll have Michigan, the game at Michigan this weekend, and then Iowa comes to Bloomington on Monday. So I think we'll learn a lot about Indiana over this next 3-game stretch, and even looking ahead even more, you get the games with Louisville and Notre Dame. So tough stretch coming up. Hopefully it'll be one where Indiana is able to be competitive in most of these games. But I'm sure the coaching staff's looking at this schedule and thinking to themselves, who made this schedule? But it's one of those things where you got to play whoever's up next, and I think we'll learn. If Indiana can, I think if they could go 2-3 in this next 5-game stretch, they'd be doing really well for themselves. So, be interested to see how it all shakes out.
Yep. Alrighty. Well, coming up next here on Podcast on the Brink, my interview with the great AJ Moye. All right. Well, I am very excited to be joined on this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink by AJ Moye. And considering that it is Indiana Duke week, there are few guests who would be more fitting to have on the program this week. AJ, welcome to the show, man. It's great to have you.
Hey, thank you so much. It's an honor to still be thought of as a person of interest when it comes to IU and Duke.
Oh, of course, man. So before we look back on your career and obviously look back on that epic Duke game, I'd love to just get an update on how you're doing now. You know, what you've been up to, and especially how you're doing health wise. I mean, I think obviously everybody knows about the injury, the stroke that you suffered several years ago.
Yeah.
How are you doing since then?
Well, I'll sum it all up. Yeah, I got done at IU and I played professional basketball overseas. That was wonderful. You know, got MVP a few times and All-Star every year, Defensive Player of the Year about 3 times. And then I had a stroke, man. I had a stroke. I was born with a hole in my no one ever knew it. And then I got hit in the head, and that's probably like my 3rd or 4th concussion. And ended up causing the blood to circulate the wrong way. And so blood kind of went into my heart, and I had a pretty big stroke. I was unconscious for 3 days, and
oh man,
yeah, it was very tough. When I woke up, I had no memory, and I couldn't move the right side of my body, so I couldn't walk. And I remember the doctor saying that probably could never really walk straight again, and my memory would never come back. So
wow,
you know, it was something. The interesting thing was the only thing I knew was that you know, that I believed in God, and that was all I knew. So one day it just came back. It happened November 15th, 2011, and then one day in 2012, like January 20-something, it just came back, and I could walk, talk, I could do everything. So, you know, I was, praise God, I was happy. And then I actually came back, and I was actually going to play, and I went to workout.
yeah,
I did well, and I had about 6 or 7 offers. And then I just decided, hey, my time, I said, hey, you know, I decided that I just wanted to coach and help the youth and help people, you know, get to accomplish some of the same things that I accomplished.
yeah.
And I thought, like, you know, and all my coaches knew that I'd be a coach one day, because every coach I had was like, man, you love the game. And after that, you know, I was the head coach at Oaks Christian School, and we had about 5 or 6 D1 players, and a good school, probably finished like top 8 in the state. And now I coach over at Oak Park High School. And, you know, this year we have Riley Batten, who's probably a strong candidate for Mr. Basketball in California. He's going to Utah. We have Wes Slackett, he's a point guard. He's going to Dartmouth. And we have a big man, Ezekiel Richards, who's about 7 feet. Riley Batten's about 6'10", but we got Ezekiel Richards. He'll probably go to Gonzaga, you know, but he's got to, you know, keep working. He's got a lot of offers as well. And we got Clark Slackard. He won freshman of the year last year in the state. So we got a lot of talent.
Yeah.
Probably got like 7 or 8 D1 guys. And then I also, what I really do, I work at a sports academy, which is a state-of-the-art facility that was just built out here in California. Probably, I want to say probably about 3 years ago. And so I'm working over there as well. And so I'm master at basketball, so I do workouts. I work with pros, all the way down to like small kids. So I coach a 13-year-old team. We won the national championship in AAU. So it's real good, man. I've just been able to take my basketball experience, and I've just been able to translate it into something where I can help others. And I've been having a blast at it. So
that's awesome.
That's me.
So all the guys that you coach, are they well aware of your playing career? Have they seen highlights of the Duke game in 2002?
Yeah, I think they all do. They eventually do, because most of the time I really don't tell people, you know, that I played. I think obviously they can tell that I played.
Yeah.
The things that I know and the nuances and the subtle details and things of that nature. But you know, they all end up at some point. All of them end up, you know, going to YouTube or going somewhere, and they're like, "Yo, coach, you were this, you know that, you did this, you did that," and I'm like, "Yeah." But I think everybody knows about the block on Carlos Boozer, though.
Yeah.
I probably in my life, I want to say at least 2 2 times a week, definitely once a week, someone comes up to me and just mentions something about the Carlos Boozer. Like every week I've been alive since that game.
That is not surprising
that's
at all.
Pretty cool. Yeah,
you need to give everybody one of these T-shirts, one of these new T-shirts that have the block on there.
yeah. That's the thing. I loved it. Connor, my boy, he hit me up probably like about this summer. He said, "Hey man, I want to do some shirts, and I want you to be the shirt. I want to make a couple shirts for you."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "No, really, I want to do it." And he gave me the company website, and I looked at it. I'm like, "Wow, man, like you really do this. Why do you want to do me?" He's like, "Come on, you crazy?" He's like, "I was a big time fan, and I loved that moment."
What?
So that was real cool.
It's such an iconic moment. That game was so iconic. And, and I was on campus at that time. And I know, you mentioned in an interview with Jeff Rabjohns from a few years ago, you said, that whole run, talking about that 2002 run, we just had a great time playing basketball. I've never been happier in my life. And I think what was so great is that fans felt the same way, especially people who were on campus then, because it was definitely the most memorable and fun 2 weeks of my time at IU. So just kind of take me back to that time. I mean, what were those 2 weeks, from that victory on through going to the national title game? What was that like to be a part of?
Well, man, I'm gonna tell you this. It was the thing. I'm an old loyal dog, I guess. So the person that I always give the credit to, who deserves the credit, is Coach Bobby Knight. Because I remember when he was recruiting me, he said, "Hey, I feel like if I get you and I get Jared Jeffries and and I add that with Jeff Newton and Coverdale and Fife, like he really told me like everything about this team that we would, eventually get to. But he said, I really feel like you guys can go to the Final Four every year you're in college." And he said that. And I was like, cool. So, I was like, hey, where do I sign? And so that it was all his vision. Because when you look at us, like on paper, right, we're not that amazing. But when you really look at us and study us all, we all complement each other. And we all like had a certain elements about us, and all of us are the same type of people. Like we all are people that would do anything it takes to win a game, to do anything it takes, whatever positions we had to play, whatever we had to shoot, whatever we had to rebound, whatever. Like, so it goes back to Bobby Knight and his brilliance of having us all together. And then Mike Davis, man, Mike was an offensive genius, man. He really was. He could really mix and match people, and then he really listened. So he'd really listen to us. Sometimes we'd be like, hey, what about if we do this on this play? He's like, all right, cool, And then we had John Treelor. See, John Treelor was the man. Everyone will tell you, if you talk to any of the players, they'll tell you about him. He was like a mad scientist as well, because before every game, he'd have us doing something or looking at something. I remember he had us looking at the Buster Douglas-Mike Tyson fight the night before we played Duke. And he's like, hey, no one thought that that Mike Tyson was going to lose, but Buster Douglas knew he was going to win. And then he showed us the fight, and then he paused it after he struck Mike one time, and he had this look in his eyes. He's like, look in his eyes, man. Look in his eyes. That's a look of pure desire. That's a look of pure intensity. That's a look of, I'm not losing this today. And so he did that like with every round. So it was really a lot of fun. And we really just didn't care. We just like, hey, if we had to get a stop, we're going to get a stop. If we had to get a bucket, we were going to do whatever it took to get a bucket. And again, that's the most fun I've ever had in my life playing basketball. And I'm just so grateful and thankful to the state of Indiana, because I say it all the time, in 49 other states, it's basketball, but this is Indiana. It's just a way of life in Indiana.
Yes, it is. And that team, you guys are still pretty close now, right? I think I saw a couple years ago you guys had a reunion that I think everybody or most everybody was at, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, man. I mean, we're close. I mean, I know probably about 6 or 7 of us. We have a group chat like on the phone, and we talk every day. Like,
oh, really?
every day. Every day we're texting about something, and we talk about everything. So I mean, we're just a close group, and we came back and got together 2 summers ago, and it was the same feeling, just a bunch of guys that love each other, and a bunch of guys that would do anything for the other one. So it was really that still is the most fun I ever had in my life. I'm happy I was able to live through that, because that was just pure fun. It was fun.
And we all know how important chemistry is on a basketball team. And you mentioned how, so many of those guys came from different backgrounds. So what was it? Mm-hmm. I mean, was it just a love for basketball that brought you guys together? Was it, kind of going through what that group went through when Coach Knight got fired and the transition to Coach Davis? Did that, kind of help bring you guys together? Like, what was it that has made that group so close in such a lasting way?
Well, I think you hit it on the head right there. Any time you go through adversity, right? It's like in life, right? In life, you have choices, and anytime you go through adversity in life, it can either strengthen your resolve and narrow your focus, or it can cause you to kind of get derailed and kind of get off track a bit, right? Or you know what I mean? And so it's the fiber and the character of the people. Again, which Bobby Knight brought in. I think that's all about. That's like a basketball is a lot like life, right? You have to be able to decipher and be able to read who are the people that you want to be around you, who are the people that you want in your foxhole, and then you have to just trust your gut and choose those people. And I think like the good coaches like Bob Knight, like Izzy, like Coach K, you know what I mean? They can kind of get a good read on people's character, and then kind of select them and say, hey, I'm a ride with this person, or I want this person. So that I think it was something good. I remember when Coach Knight was fired, he got us all together, and he told us, hey, you guys will be fine. I want all of you guys to stick together. And he said something like, I don't want to even say what he said, but he said stick together. And he said, we'll make it. And we made it. You know what I mean? So,
do you ever wonder how your career might have been different if you had gotten a chance to play for Coach Knight for 4 years? Because obviously that's the main reason why you came.
Yeah, I wonder that all the time. And of course, you learn to grow, and you learn how to, you have to make the best of what happens in your life. Whatever transpires, you have to just say, hey, this happened. All right, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep working. But I wonder that oftentimes. Man, I remember a guy like Andre Emmett, right, playing for him at Tech during the time when I was at Indiana. I'm like, yo, I can. I mean, I'd have loved to be him. Or I got to. It's just the way his motion offense, and in particular was the way he Bob Knight, he taught me angles, right? He taught me how to read people and how to attack at angles. And so me and him, we used to always talk about angles, talk about that. He was much more than a basketball coach to me. I don't know, like, I can't really speak about like his relationships with everyone else. I just can talk about my relationship with him was it was something that I really treasured, and that was almost written out a storybook for me.
Yeah. Because
he was a coach that loved the game like how I loved the game. And so I loved him for that. And it rocked my world. For my whole freshman year, I wasn't even, I was in the game. I loved the game, but I was so hurt,
Yeah.
And then by my sophomore year, I was good. But, a piece of me was definitely hurt by the fact I never got to play for Bobby.
Do you still have a good relationship with him now?
Yeah. I talk with him probably about once every 3 years or so, but he's just a great person. I don't have to speak with him every day.
Yeah.
But he knows what he meant to be, and I know that he thought of me very highly. I mean, he said some things about me like I was the toughest kid. He's coached since Quinn Buckner and things like that. So I appreciate him and I love him.
You mentioned toughness there, and that's one question that I wanted to ask you about. Have you kept up with this year's team at all and kind of the transition to Archie Miller?
Yes, I have.
So you've probably seen that one of the big things that Archie is trying to get from this team is toughness, both mentally and physically. Get on the ground for loose balls, be mentally tough when something doesn't go right.
I just got a question. Do they have a player that played at Indiana coaching there?
Say that again?
Do they have a player that played at Indiana coaching there?
No, they don't. Not well. Derek Elston is on the
All
staff.
right. Well,
Yeah, Derek Elston's on the staff.
where it's like, I'm gonna tell you this, man. You look at Duke, right?
Yep.
Why does Duke year in year out are the best? It's a Duke ran program.
Yeah.
I really feel that's the way to do it. Coach Knight used to have players. He had a son. You gotta have like people who really went through the battles. It's like UCLA, right? They keep ties with me. Doesn't matter who's coaching. Like, hey, I've seen Tyus Edney last through 3 or 4 coaches, and he's my good friend.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to keep someone who's familiar with the sacrifice, and I don't want to get into any of this and any of that, but you have to keep someone who was there during success, right?
Yeah.
And you have to have someone who was there to kind of, say the same things that the coaches are saying, but also offering another perspective because they've done it, right? So when they speak, it can actually, I don't know how to say it, but it can actually register, right? It can register with them because they're like, okay, he's been in my shoes, he's went through it, he's done this, he's done that, he's done that, and that's my only thing. I really wish we would have some people around who have done some pretty incredible things and have done some notable things with our program. Because I really feel like Indiana's a school like Duke. Indiana's a school like UCLA. Indiana's a school. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we're a school where our culture has created a lot of who we are. We're not a school without a culture. You know what I mean? It's not like we're I don't even want to get into it because I don't want to wrong anyone.
Yeah.
We're a rich basketball culture, right? And so I feel like the way to keep a culture going, you have to constantly be cultivating the culture, and you have to constantly, you know what I mean? You have to have those pillars in that culture. Because if you take the pillars away, it's like if we built this grand castle, this grand tower, grand whatever, big giant, massive 20-story building, and then we just took all the pillars off of it, right? And there's no pillars, there's no resemblance of what it was once known as, right? But it'll be a little confusing. And so I think that may, I'm not saying that's the problem, but I think that may be a problem,
Yeah.
But that's just something outside looking at. So I don't know. But the toughness, it's got to get tougher, but, it's a process, and this is the first year at it. But if there's one thing I could say, I'd say that. Like, I'd like to see them get some IU people in there. I'm not saying be the head coach, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm saying, man, we should have got Fife. We should have paid him whatever we needed. Like, you know what I mean? Just get players in there, I'm not even saying me, I'd love to go coach there, but I'm just saying we have to, because it's hard without it, you know what I mean? Because I know Steve, he relies on Tyus a lot.
Yeah.
But it's just we got. I'm just saying we have a lot of people out there that are still active in our game, and man, we got to reach out to them. Because,
yeah.
I don't think these kids. I don't think this generation of kids truly understands what it means to play at Indiana.
Yeah. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and I know that we only have a few minutes left. So I want to ask you this question to close. Obviously, Indiana is coming up on this Duke game this week. Duke is going to be heavily favored once again. They're a top 5 team with tons and tons of talent, and Indiana certainly played their best game of the season recently, but they've been struggling this year. If you could go back and if you could give this IU team a pep talk before Wednesday night's game, after you, of course, remind them that it's just Duke and not Jesus Christ and the 12 disciples, what would you tell them? What would be your final words to those guys coming out of the locker room?
Hey, first of all, tell me, who did we play the last game? Who did we play the last game?
Eastern Michigan.
Oh yeah, see, yeah, that was good. Hey, but I'd say this, and if I could say it, I'd say this. I just let them know this. It's one thing. Like I said to you earlier in the interview, in 49 other states, it's basketball, but this is Indiana. You know, this is a way of life. Every single time you go on a basketball court, you have to ask yourself this after the game: what do I have left? Now, left comprises of 4 simple things: left, love, effort, focus, and toughness. Don't come back in the locker room if you haven't left all of your love out there on the court. And that's just the will. That's just the heart. That's just the intensity. That's just, effort. Giving everything that you can possibly muster from yourself. You must leave it out there on the court. Don't come back in that locker room feeling like you can run 2 miles after the game. You need to be feeling like, hey, I need an IV. I can't move. Focus. And that's the key. I think in that regard, the focus is what's lacking in our, and it's not their fault. It's no fault of their own. It's just our world is so technologically advanced that it's so much other things to do in the world. Yeah. Whereas when we were small, I used to play with a stick and a rope. So it's different. But focus, and that's that ability to hone in with your mind, hone in on a task, and be relentless, and just be constantly pursuing the complete toughness. And this is the nail in the coffin. It's you must outdo the person in everything. You got to outperform them in terms of hustle, outperform them in terms of rebounding, outperform them in everything you can outperform them in. Tough. Be tough. Be tough. Be rock solid. Step in there and take that charge. Dive for that ball. Reach out to your furthest, possible, way of reaching and tip that ball. Things of that nature. But it's all about what do you have left, and your answer should always be nothing. At the end of the game, what do you have left? Nothing. Love, effort, focus, toughness. So that's it. That's all I got to say.
That is good stuff. I'm going to take that clip and send it to Archie. Maybe he can use it before the game on Wednesday.
Yeah, I hope they can.
That was great, AJ. It's a thrill to be able to talk to you. You're definitely one of my favorite Hoosiers that I had the pleasure of watching. It's awesome to hear that everything's going well, and I really appreciate your insight.
All righty.
All right. Thanks, AJ.
All right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. To get more from me and from Alex, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana University basketball. If you liked this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or family member who loves IU basketball as much as you do. You can also support the show by leaving a rating and review on iTunes, which helps us get the word out to more IU fans like yourself. We will be back next week with a new episode. Until then, as always, go Hoosiers.